Welcome back. Tonight, we're drifting slowly into the depths of one of 5 nights at Freddy's most enduring mysteries. A figure that appears in shadows and silence, materializing without warning in dimly lit offices and abandoned hallways. A slumped golden bear with hollow eyes that seem to stare into something beyond our understanding. This is Golden Freddy, an entity whose very existence raises more questions than answers, whose identity has sparked debates that span a decade, and whose story intertwines with the darkest moments in Fazbear Entertainment's blood-stained history. From the spring-lock suits of Fredbear's Family Diner to the vengeful nightmares of Ultimate Custom Night, from the tears of a dying child to the rage of a spirit that refuses to rest, we'll trace every thread of this enigma, one spirit or two, Cassidy or the crying child, Fredbear or something else entirely. These questions have haunted the community since that first unsettling encounter in the original game, and even now, after years of revelations and discoveries, Golden Freddy remains wrapped in layers of ambiguity that Scott Cawthon seems determined to preserve. Whether you're here to finally piece together the puzzle, letting the familiar mysteries wash over you like a gentle tide as you drift towards sleep, or simply allowing the tale to unfold in that quiet space where consciousness meets dreams, this will carry you through the complete story of Golden Freddy. Every appearance, every theory, every unanswered question that still lingers in the darkness. Before we begin, feel free to like and subscribe, but only if you enjoy this kind of slow, immersive storytelling that unfolds like a dream. And let me know in the comments what your theory is about Golden Freddy's true identity. It's always fascinating to see how differently we all interpret the same cryptic clues. Let's begin. In the hazy beginnings of Fazbear Entertainment, before the sprawling pizza parlors and the towering animatronic performances, there existed a simpler establishment. A family diner where the air smelled of fresh pizza dough and children's laughter mingled with the mechanical whir of early entertainment technology. This was Fredbear's Family Diner, founded in the 1970s by 2 inventors whose partnership would ultimately shape decades of tragedy, Henry Emily and William Afton, one driven by creativity and a genuine desire to bring joy to children, the other harboring darker ambitions that would only reveal themselves slowly, like a stain spreading through clear water. The diner featured 2 primary attractions, 2 animatronic performers that represented the cutting edge of the era's technology. Fredbear, a golden bear with a purple top hat and bow tie, stood as the restaurant's mascot and main draw. Beside him performed Spring Bonnie, a yellow rabbit whose cheerful demeanor masked the dangerous mechanics within. These weren't ordinary animatronics, fixed to stages and limited to pre-programmed movements. No, these were spring-lock suits, marvels of engineering that could function both as automated performers and as wearable costumes for human entertainers. The concept was brilliant in its ambition and horrifying in its execution. The spring-lock mechanism worked through a series of tightly wound springs and locks that compressed the animatronic components, the endoskeleton, the wiring, the mechanical joints, into the walls of the suit when a special crank was used. This created just enough space for a human to slip inside, becoming the character, entertaining children with the flexibility of human movement, combined with the spectacle of the animatronic design. But this innovation came with a terrible price. The springs were sensitive, reactive to the slightest moisture or sudden movement. A breath of humid air, a bead of sweat, even the dampness from crying could be enough to trigger a failure. When the locks released, the compressed components would snap back into place with devastating force, crushing anyone inside in a matter of seconds. The training tapes that Fazbear Entertainment distributed to employees spoke of these dangers in calm, procedural tones, warning performers to wind the locks tightly and avoid any moisture near the mechanisms. But warnings, no matter how stern, could never fully convey the gruesome reality of a spring lock failure, the sound of metal tearing through flesh, the weight of an endoskeleton collapsing inward, the silence that followed. Fredbear himself stood as the primary mascot of the diner, the face of this early venture into animatronic entertainment. His design was simpler than the elaborate characters that would come later, more rounded, slightly pudgier in appearance, with that distinctive purple hat and bow tie that set him apart from his later iterations. He was Henry Emily's creation, a character meant to embody warmth and approachability, to make children feel safe and excited in equal measure. The diner prospered in those early days, drawing families who marveled at the novelty of these mechanical performers, who sang and moved with an uncanny semblance of life. Children pressed their faces against the stage barriers, eyes wide with wonder, while parents relaxed at tables adorned with checkered tablecloths and paper plates stacked with pizza slices. It seemed, for a brief moment, like the beginning of something wonderful, a franchise that would spread joy and create lasting memories. How quickly that illusion would shatter. As the diner's popularity grew, so too did the ambitions of its founders. Plans emerged for expansion, for a larger restaurant chain that would bring Freddy Fazbear's Pizza into existence, introducing new characters and updated technology. But even in these optimistic early days, seeds of darkness were already taking root. William Afton, the business-minded partner whose frustrations with the world simmered beneath a facade of professionalism, began to notice things. The way Henry's family life seemed so stable, so fulfilling, while his own family dynamics grew increasingly strained. The way success came more naturally to Henry's creative endeavors, while his own contributions felt overlooked, undervalued. These resentments would fester, would grow into something far more malevolent than simple jealousy. But in the beginning, in those early days at Fredbear's family diner, the darkness was still hidden, still waiting for its moment. And then there was Golden Freddy, or rather, the question of Golden Freddy. Was he simply Fredbear by another name? A retired version of the mascot suit? Something else entirely? This question sits at the very heart of the mystery, because the relationship between Fredbear and Golden Freddy determines so much of what we understand about the entity's nature. Some evidence suggests they coexisted, that Golden Freddy was a separate springlock suit that served alongside Fredbear at the diner. Posters found in later games show both characters present, implying they weren't the same animatronic, but rather two variations on the same basic design. Other clues hint that Golden Freddy might be what remained of Fredbear after years of disuse, after the suit was retired and left to decay in sealed safe rooms, stripped of its endoskeleton and left as a hollow shell. The design similarities are undeniable. Both are golden yellow bears. Both wear top hats and bow ties, though the colors differ depending on the source. Sometimes black, like the later Freddy variants, sometimes purple, like the original Fredbear. Both are connected to the springlock technology that would eventually be deemed too dangerous for continued use. The Ultimate Guide mentions that Fredbear and Golden Freddy share enough characteristics to be considered the same being, or at least related versions of the same concept. Yet when we examine Golden Freddy's behavior in the games, his supernatural qualities, the way he manifests and disappears, crashes games, and appears in multiple locations simultaneously, it becomes clear that something more complex is at work. This isn't just an old animatronic suit. This is something that transcends the physical limitations of metal and wires. A presence, a haunting, that uses the image of that golden bear to communicate, to frighten, to seek something that remains frustratingly out of reach. Whether that presence once inhabited Fredbear himself, or whether Golden Freddy represents something separate that simply resembles the diner's mascot, remains one of the fundamental questions we must examine. The answer shapes everything else we understand about this entity's origins, its motivations, and its ultimate purpose in the sprawling narrative of Five Nights at Freddy's. The confusion is intentional, of course. Scott Cawthon has stated in interviews that the ambiguity surrounding certain elements of the lore is deliberate, meant to encourage fans to theorize and engage with the story on deeper levels. Golden Freddy sits at the center of this intentional mystery, a character whose very existence seems designed to resist easy explanation. Every time we think we've pinned down his identity, new evidence emerges that complicates the picture. Every revelation brings new questions. And perhaps that's the point, that some mysteries in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe aren't meant to be solved completely, but rather to be explored, discussed, and contemplated in the quiet hours when the boundaries between certainty and doubt begin to blur. In 1983, tragedy struck Fredbear's family diner in a way that would echo through decades of horror. A birthday party, meant to be a celebration, became the site of an event that would traumatize a family and contribute to the downward spiral of William Afton's sanity. The victim was a young boy, known to fans as the crying child or the bite victim, whose real name remains one of many unanswered questions in the lore. This child, one of William Afton's sons, lived in a state of constant fear. His older brother Michael tormented him relentlessly, wearing a foxy mask to leap from closets and corners, to startle and frighten in ways that might have seemed like harmless pranks but accumulated into genuine psychological trauma. The child's fears weren't irrational. He had reason to be terrified of the animatronics, though whether this stemmed from witnessing something terrible, perhaps even his sister Elizabeth's death at Circus Baby's hands, or simply from the unnerving nature of the mechanical performers themselves, we can't say for certain. What we know is that the child clung to his Fredbear plush for comfort, a stuffed toy that seemed to speak to him in quiet moments, offering cryptic warnings and promises that things would be okay, that he would be put back together. This plush, we would later learn, was more than a simple comfort object. It contained a camera and speaker, allowing William Afton to monitor and communicate with his son, watching from afar, offering hollow reassurances even as he failed to provide the one thing the child truly needed: safety. As the child's birthday approached, the torment intensified. Michael and his friends, wearing masks of Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy, cornered the boy repeatedly, playing on his fears with increasing cruelty. They painted vivid pictures of what the animatronics might do at night, how the suits in the back room might hide dark secrets, feeding into nightmares that were already plaguing the child's sleep. The relentless psychological pressure built toward an inevitable breaking point, and that breaking point came on what should have been a day of celebration. The birthday party at Fredbear's family diner. The child, already trembling with fear, tried to hide beneath tables, tried to escape the overwhelming stimulus of the restaurant's cheerful chaos. But Michael spotted him, gathered his friends, and in a moment, of juvenile cruelty, that would haunt him for the rest of his life, they decided on one final prank, one last scare to make their mark on the birthday boy's special day. They hoisted the crying child into the air, ignoring his screams and tears, and carried him toward the stage where Fredbear performed. The animatronic bear, with his purple top hat and friendly smile, continued his program routine, unaware of the tragedy about to unfold. The other children in the restaurant watched as Michael and his friends lifted the birthday boy higher, chanting for Fredbear to give him a big kiss. They thrust the child's head into Fredbear's mechanical mouth, past the rows of teeth designed for aesthetic purposes, but still hard enough, sharp enough to cause damage. And then, in a moment of catastrophic mechanical failure, the spring-lock jaw clamped down. The sound, which Phone Guy would later describe in a recording, was a sickening crunch that silenced the entire restaurant. Blood began to flow from the crushed skull. The child's body went limp, and the laughter died in Michael's throat as he realized what he had done. The aftermath unfolded in a haze of horror. Paramedics arrived. The child was rushed to a hospital, but the damage was too severe. Frontal lobe crushed, brain matter damaged beyond repair. The child slipped into a coma, monitors beeping softly in a sterile hospital room while his family kept vigil. Michael, consumed by guilt, leaned close to apologize in trembling whispers, desperate for forgiveness that would never come. The Fredbear plush sat by the bedside, and whether it was William's voice through the speaker or something else entirely, it whispered one final promise: "I will put you back together." These words, cryptic and cold, would become central to understanding the child's fate. What did it mean to be put back together? Was it a promise of resurrection, of the child's consciousness being preserved in some form? Or was it merely a father's desperate attempt to comfort a dying son? Empty words that could never undo the damage. The child's final moments played out in fragments, flashes of memory that blurred the line between reality and nightmare. The flat line of the monitor, the darkness closing in, and then silence. The date of this tragedy, 1983, was confirmed through multiple sources in the games. The copyright date on the Fredbear and Friends television show playing in the hospital room. The year of the bite that would forever be known as the Bite of 83, distinct from the later Bite of 87 that would close a different location under different circumstances. This child's death marked a turning point in multiple ways. For Michael Afton, it became a wound that would never heal, a guilt that would drive him to spend his life trying to atone, to undo his father's crimes and free the spirits trapped in metal shells. For William Afton, it may have been the catalyst that pushed him toward his experiments with remnant and possession, a twisted attempt to fulfill that promise to put his son back together by discovering the secret to binding souls to animatronic bodies. And for Fredbear himself, or the suit that bore his image, it became the site of the first tragedy in a long line of horrors. The springlock mechanism, already known to be dangerous, had claimed its first victim in the public eye. The incident would contribute to the eventual retirement of all springlock suits, to the sealing of safe rooms where such equipment was stored, to the shift toward animatronics that couldn't be worn by human performers. But more than these practical consequences, the Bite of 83 raised a question that sits at the very heart of the Golden Freddy mystery. What happened to the crying child's soul after he died? Did it remain in the hospital, fading into whatever comes after death? Or did it return to the place of trauma, to the mechanical jaws that crushed his skull, seeking something in that golden bear suit, This question of the crying child's fate would become inseparable from the mystery of Golden Freddy's identity, because one of the most prominent theories about this supernatural entity suggests that the crying child and Golden Freddy are connected, that the boy's spirit found its way back to a version of Fredbear, to a golden bear suit, where it could finally find the reunion that death denied him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, because Golden Freddy's story isn't just about one tragedy, one victim. It's about multiple souls, multiple deaths, and the way those deaths intertwine to create something far more complex than a simple haunting. To understand Golden Freddy fully, we need to examine the second major event that shaped his existence, an incident that occurred 2 years after the crying child's death in the blood-stained halls of the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. In 1985, William Afton committed the crimes that would define the entire 5 Nights at Freddy's narrative. The missing children incident, as it came to be known in newspaper reports and police investigations. 5 children, lured away from the safety of a birthday party crowd, murdered in cold blood, their bodies stuffed into animatronic suits, where they would remain hidden until the smell of decay became too overwhelming to ignore. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of madness. This was calculated, methodical, a test of William Afton's growing obsession with the supernatural properties of death and machinery. He had seen it before, or so the law suggests. Seen how his daughter Elizabeth's soul had possessed Circus Baby after her fatal encounter with the ice cream dispensing claw. Witnessed how Charlie Emily's spirit had inhabited the security puppet after she was left to die in the rain outside of Freddy Fazbear's location. These observations had planted an idea in Afton's twisted mind, a hypothesis that he now sought to confirm through deliberate experimentation. Could he recreate this phenomenon? Could he bind souls to metal shells through murder? And if so, what might he learn about death itself, about consciousness, about the possibility of achieving something like immortality? To carry out his plan, Afton used the Spring Bonnie suit, one of the old Springlock costumes from Fredbear's family diner that still lurked in the safe rooms of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. The Yellow Rabbit costume, friendly and familiar to children who had visited the diner in earlier years, became a lure, a way to gain trust and lead victims away from the crowd without raising suspicion. The safe room, a hidden space erased from digital maps and invisible to the restaurant's security systems, provided the perfect location for his crimes. No cameras, no witnesses, just William Afton and the children he had marked for death. The victims' identities would remain unknown for years, their names lost to time and Afton's careful covering of tracks. But eventually, through careful examination of minigames and hidden clues, through puzzles in the survival logbook, and the placement of gravestones in the Lawkeeper ending of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, we would learn their names: Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Cassidy. 5 children who had come to Freddy Fazbear's Pizza expecting fun and games, expecting pizza and prizes and memories that would last a lifetime. Instead, they found a killer in a rabbit suit, and their lives ended in that sealed room where no one could hear their screams. Afton's methods varied slightly with each victim, tailored to what would draw them away from the safety of the group. For Susie, he spun a tale about her lost dog, claiming he knew where it was, that it was still alive and waiting for her in the back. This scene, depicted in the Fruity Maze minigame, shows a young girl being led away by a figure in a Spring Bonnie suit, following the promise of reunion with a beloved pet, even as the world around her glitches and distorts, hinting at the horrible truth of what was about to happen. For the others, we have less specific information about their final moments, but the outcome was always the same. Death in the safe room, bodies hidden in ways that would prevent immediate discovery. And then, in the aftermath of the murders, something Afton likely didn't anticipate or fully control. The security puppet, inhabited by Charlie Emily's spirit, and driven by a need to protect children, emerged to perform what she would later describe as giving gifts, giving life. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, we see this process unfold in 8-bit abstraction. The puppet approaches the dead children, placing masks on their lifeless faces. Freddy, Bonnie, Chica, Foxy. 4 masks for 4 children, awakening them within the animatronic suits where they would become trapped, their consciousness fused with the mechanical bodies in a way that would drive them to wander the halls at night, confused and aggressive, seeing all adults as potential threats because adults had failed to protect them, because an adult in a costume had taken everything from them. But there was a 5th child, a 5th victim. And this is where the Golden Freddy mystery deepens, because the puppet's gift to this final child was different. In the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, after awakening the other 4 children, a 5th slumped figure appears in the shadows. The puppet approaches, but before a mask can be placed, the screen cuts to static, and we see the jump scare image of Golden Freddy, that distinctive tilted head and hollow eye sockets filling the screen. What does this mean? Did the puppet manage to give this 5th child life within Golden Freddy? Or was the process interrupted? Did this child's soul find its way to the Golden Bear suit through different means? The ambiguity is crucial because it leaves room for multiple interpretations, multiple theories about how exactly this 5th victim came to be associated with the entity we call Golden Freddy. The newspaper clippings in the original Five Nights at Freddy's game speak of 5 children who went missing, of a suspect in a costume, of the restaurant's closure pending investigation. The blood and mucus that began seeping from the animatronics during the day, foul-smelling reminders of the horror hidden within their mechanical shells. The lawsuit, the health code violations, the eventual reopening with attempts to scrub away the taint of tragedy. But nothing could truly erase what had happened. The children's souls remained, bound to the suits that had become their tombs, driven by confusion and rage that manifested as aggression toward night guards and anyone else who found themselves in the restaurant after hours. This is the core of the missing children incident, the foundation upon which so much of the Five Nights at Freddy's lore is built. 5 children murdered, 5 spirits bound to animatronic hosts, Gabriel in Freddy, Jeremy in Bonnie, Susie in Chica, Fritz in Foxy, and the 5th child, the one whose identity would remain hidden for years, the one whose name we would eventually discover through careful puzzle solving, associated with the entity that appears and disappears like a ghost, that slumps in corners with dead eyes and a mouth hanging open as if in perpetual shock. That 5th child was Cassidy, and Cassidy's story, her connection to Golden Freddy, would prove to be one of the most complicated and debated elements of the entire franchise. The discovery of Cassidy's name came through the Survival Logbook, a tie-in book published by Scott Cawthon that initially seemed like a simple merchandise item, but turned out to contain crucial lore information hidden within its pages. The logbook itself is framed as a security guard handbook for Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. filled with spaces for guards to record their thoughts and experiences. But scattered throughout the book are mysterious elements, faded text, altered words, puzzles that, when solved correctly, reveal something profound. The breakthrough came when fans noticed that certain pages were numbered incorrectly. These incorrectly numbered pages contained the words "my name," written in faded, ghostly text. Most notably, there was a drawing of a gravestone, blank except for those two words hovering above it, suggesting that whoever was writing this faded text wanted their name to be discovered, to be remembered. When fans used the incorrect page numbers as coordinates in the word search puzzle found elsewhere in the book, the letters spelled out a name: Cassidy. This revelation connected immediately to the lawkeeper ending of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, the good ending that shows 6 gravestones arranged on a hillside. 5 are clearly visible, displaying the names Gabriel, Jeremy, Susie, Fritz, and Charlotte. But 1 gravestone off to the side is obscured, its name hidden in shadow. The coordinates puzzle in the survival logbook solved this mystery. The hidden gravestone belonged to Cassidy, but the survival logbook revealed more than just a name. It suggested something even more intriguing, a conversation taking place within its pages. The faded text, which we now associated with Cassidy, asked questions. What do you see? Does he still talk to you? The party was for you. And scattered throughout the book, altered in ways that required close examination to detect, were responses. I can't see. It was for me. These responses seemed to come from a different entity, not Cassidy, but someone else who was somehow connected to her, someone who could manipulate the logbook in a different way, leaving answers that suggested a shared space, a shared existence. The questions Cassidy asked, particularly the references to he and the party, pointed toward specific events in the law. The party obviously referred to a birthday celebration, and in the context of 5 Nights at Freddy's, one particular birthday party stood out as centrally important. The party at Fredbear's family diner, where the crying child met his tragic fate. This connection sparked a theory that would dominate discussions for years. If Cassidy was asking about a party that wasn't for her, and if someone else was responding that the party was indeed for them, and if that someone couldn't see, which might reference the crying child's dying words in the hospital, or his potential state while possessing an animatronic, then perhaps both Cassidy and the crying child were somehow connected to the same entity, both inhabiting the same space, both contributing to what we perceive as Golden Freddy. This interpretation gained support from another element in the survival logbook. Throughout the book, the phrase "it's me" appears multiple times in the word search and scattered throughout various pages. This phrase had long been associated with Golden Freddy, appearing as hallucinations in the original 5 Nights at Freddy's game when the animatronic was active, suggesting that Golden Freddy was trying to communicate something specific with those words. In the context of the logbook, "it's me" could be read as part of this conversation, as Cassidy trying to identify herself, or as the other presents trying to communicate their identity to someone, perhaps to Michael Afton if he's the one using the logbook. The complexity of these layered messages, the way they seem to involve multiple consciousnesses interacting within a single object, pointed toward a possibility that many fans had suspected, but that the survival logbook seemed to confirm. Golden Freddy might not be possessed by a single spirit, but by 2. Cassidy and the crying child, somehow sharing the same golden bear suit, existing in a state of dual possession, that would explain so many of Golden Freddy's strange behaviors and contradictory characteristics. But Cassidy's identity itself raised questions. The name is gender neutral, which added to the confusion, because other evidence seemed to point in different directions regarding whether Cassidy was male or female. The voice heard when Golden Freddy appears in the first game is distinctly feminine, a young girl's laugh that accompanies his manifestation. But in Ultimate Custom Night, characters refer to the one you should not have killed using masculine pronouns, calling them he rather than she, suggesting a male identity. This contradiction would fuel endless debates, with some arguing that the feminine laugh was simply a stock sound effect, not meant to indicate gender, while others insisted that the pronouns in Ultimate Custom Night were deliberately ambiguous, meant to obscure rather than clarify. Scott Cawthon's audition call for the Vengeful Spirit's voice specifically requested someone who could portray either a young boy or a young girl, with the gender not being immediately clear. This intentional ambiguity suggests that the confusion is part of the design, that we're not meant to definitively solve this aspect of the mystery, but rather to sit with the uncertainty, to consider multiple possibilities simultaneously. In the novel trilogy, things are different. Cassidy is explicitly described as a young girl with long black hair, and she possesses Bonnie, not Golden Freddy. Golden Freddy in the novels is inhabited by a different spirit, a boy named Michael Brooks, who serves as the primary antagonist among the possessed animatronics. But Scott Cawthon has been clear that the novel continuity is separate from the game continuity, that while certain elements might parallel or inform each other, they shouldn't be taken as direct one-to-one translations. So Cassidy's portrayal in the novels tells us something about how the character might be conceptualized, but doesn't definitively answer questions about her nature in the games. What we can say with relative confidence, based on the survival logbook and the gravestone evidence, is that Cassidy is the name of the 5th missing children incident victim, the one whose spirit is most strongly associated with Golden Freddy. Whether she's the only spirit inhabiting that form, whether she's the dominant consciousness, if there are multiple spirits present, and whether she's the incredibly vengeful entity known as the one you should not have killed. These questions require us to look beyond the simple fact of her name and examine the evidence from multiple games, multiple sources, multiple angles of interpretation. Cassidy, whoever she truly is, whatever her precise nature and gender and relationship to the Golden Bear suit, stands at the center of one of Five Nights at Freddy's most enduring mysteries. Her name was hidden for years, her story obscured by layers of cryptic clues and misdirection. And even now that we know her name, even now that we can point to specific evidence of her existence, she remains elusive, her full truth just out of reach, her presence in the games marked more by absence and implication than by direct revelation. She is, in many ways, the perfect embodiment of what Golden Freddy represents in the broader narrative. A figure defined more by what we don't know than by what we do. A mystery that deepens with every answer we uncover. Golden Freddy's manifestations across the 5 Nights at Freddy's games are as varied and enigmatic as the spirit, or spirits, that inhabit him. Unlike the other animatronics, whose appearances follow certain patterns and rules, Golden Freddy seems to exist outside the normal constraints of the game world, appearing and disappearing in ways that suggest supernatural rather than mechanical movement, defying the physics that govern his fellow haunted machines. Let's trace his appearances chronologically, examining how each game adds new layers to the mystery while maintaining that core sense of wrongness that makes Golden Freddy so unsettling. In the original Five Nights at Freddy's, Golden Freddy is more of an Easter egg than a consistent threat, though his presence carries enormous narrative weight. His appearance is preceded by a very specific trigger. When checking camera 2B, which shows the West Hall, there's a poster of Freddy Fazbear on the wall. This poster can, with extremely low probability, change to show a close-up of Golden Freddy's face. Hollow eyes staring directly at the camera. When this happens, accompanied by a young girl's laugh, the player knows what's coming. Lowering the camera monitor reveals Golden Freddy sitting in the office, slumped against the wall or floor in a pose that suggests a suit without an endoskeleton, without the rigid structure that keeps the other animatronics upright. His head tilts to the side. His jaw hangs open. His eyes are empty black voids with tiny white pinprick pupils barely visible in the darkness. He simply sits there, unmoving but radiating menace, as if his very presence is enough to end your night. And it is. If you don't immediately pull the camera monitor back up to make him disappear, Golden Freddy will jump scare you. And unlike other animatronics whose jump scares lead to a game over screen, Golden Freddy's attack crashes the entire game. The program closes. You're sent back to your desktop. It's a jarring meta element that breaks the fourth wall and suggests that Golden Freddy exists on a different level from the physical animatronics, that he can affect the game itself in ways that shouldn't be possible. This crashing mechanic would become one of Golden Freddy's signature characteristics, appearing in multiple games as a way of signifying that he's not bound by the same rules as everything else in the restaurant. But there's more. Hidden deeper in the code, there's another way to trigger Golden Freddy. On the custom night, if you set the AI to 1987, which references the byte of 87 that Phone Guy mentions in his calls, Golden Freddy's image flashes on screen and the game crashes immediately. This Easter egg sparked enormous amounts of speculation when the game first released, with many players initially believing that Golden Freddy was somehow connected to or responsible for the byte of 87, though we now know that incident involved the toy animatronics in a different location. Scott Cawthon later clarified that this Easter egg was actually intended to dispel rumors about the byte of 87, not to confirm Golden Freddy's involvement, but the connection between the Golden Bear and biting incidents, whether the byte of 83 or 87, would persist in fan theories. Phone Guy's death on Night 4 also hints at Golden Freddy's involvement, because the audio of his final moments, while he's being attacked by what sounds like multiple animatronics, includes a distinctive sound at the very end. Golden Freddy's roar. This suggests that the Golden Bear was either present during the attack or delivered the killing blow, adding another layer to his mysterious nature. If he can teleport, if he can appear without following the normal movement patterns tracked by cameras and doors, then he could easily have been part of the assault on Phone Guy, even while the other animatronics were approaching from their usual paths. In Five Nights at Freddy's 2, Golden Freddy appears in his withered form, more damaged and decrepit than his appearance in the first game. He's missing his left ear, with wires protruding from the socket. More wires emerge from his shoulders and joints, giving him an even more broken, abandoned appearance. His jaw hangs even more loosely, revealing a full set of upper teeth. The empty eye sockets are larger, more prominent, emphasizing the absence of eyes in a way that makes him look less like a deactivated machine and more like a corpse, a body that death has hollowed out from within. His behavior in the second game is more aggressive than in the first, though still unique, Compared to the other animatronics, he only becomes active on night 6, as if he's been waiting, watching, building up to this specific moment. When he does appear, he has 2 distinct behaviors. Sometimes he manifests as a disembodied head floating in the hallway, visible when you shine your flashlight. If you stare at him too long, he'll jump scare you directly from the hallway. But if you notice him and quickly look away, putting up the monitor and then lowering it again, you might find him sitting in your office, that same slumped pose from the first game, waiting for you to notice him so he can attack. The way to defend against him is unusual. You can't use doors because the second game's office doesn't have doors. Instead, you have to put on the Freddy Fazbear mask, the hollow replica that supposedly tricks the animatronics into thinking you're one of them. But with Golden Freddy, the timing is crucial. Put the mask on too late and he'll attack anyway, as if he can see through the disguise or simply doesn't care about it. The fact that the mask works at all on a supernatural entity is strange, suggesting that maybe the spirit or spirits inside still operate according to some kind of animatronic logic, still follow certain programmed rules even while transcending others. In the Save Them minigame, which depicts the aftermath of another series of murders, the 1987 incident that led to the new location's closure, Golden Freddy appears in various rooms, but he behaves differently here than in the main gameplay. If you move near him, he simply disappears, vanishing before you can interact with him. It's as if he's observing, bearing witness to the horrors without directly participating, present but not engaged. This passive role in the minigame contrasts sharply with his aggressive appearances during the nights, suggesting different aspects of his nature or different intentions depending on the context. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 features Golden Freddy primarily in minigames, rather than as an active threat during the main gameplay. In the Stage 01 minigame, accessed through a specific sequence of inputs that mimic a phone's keypad, we see Golden Freddy and Spring Bonnie performing together on stage at what's presumably Fredbear's family diner. This is one of the few times we see Golden Freddy in a context that isn't horrifying, simply existing as an entertainment animatronic before everything went wrong. His appearance here is pudgier, more rounded, closer to what Fredbear looked like in his original diner setting. The most significant Golden Freddy appearance in the third game comes in the Happiest Day minigame, a hidden sequence that represents the good ending, the freeing of the children's spirits. A child wearing the Golden Freddy mask sits alone behind a table, while other masked children gather around, brought together through the completion of various minigames throughout the game. The puppet appears, represented by a child in a puppet mask, and gives the Golden Freddy child a birthday cake, recreating the party that they never got to have, the celebration that ended in death. As the child receives the cake, their mask falls away, and they disappear, presumably passing on to whatever lies beyond. The other children follow, their masks falling in sequence, balloons floating upward representing their freed spirits. This minigame suggests that the spirit, or spirits in Golden Freddy, needed this specific ritual, this recreation of a birthday party, to finally find peace. The connection to the crying child is obvious, the party that went so horribly wrong, but it also works for Cassidy, who died during a birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, or any of the missing children incident victims who were lured away during celebrations. In the bad ending, visible if you don't complete the Happiest Day requirements, the animatronic heads from the good ending screen appear with light still glowing in their eye sockets, suggesting the spirits remain trapped. Golden Freddy's head is among them, with what appears to be 2 lights visible, leading some to theorize that this represents 2 spirits, though closer examination suggests it might just be light reflection, illuminating the inside of the empty head. Ultimate Custom Night gives Golden Freddy his most prominent role in the series, though his exact function remains debated. In the main gameplay, he appears in his withered form as a selectable antagonist, behaving much as he did in the second game, manifesting in the office and requiring quick reflexes with the monitor to avoid his jump scare. But the real significance comes in the context of what Ultimate Custom Night represents as a whole. The game is framed as an endless nightmare, a purgatory where someone is being forced to endure an infinite cycle of horror and death, tormented by every animatronic from across the franchise's history. Voice lines from various characters make reference to the one you should not have killed, suggesting that this nightmare has an architect, a vengeful spirit orchestrating the torment of someone who deserves it. The evidence strongly points to Golden Freddy as this architect, which we'll explore in more depth later, but his presence in the gameplay itself, his ability to appear at random despite the player's preparations, reinforces his role as something beyond the other animatronics, something with greater power and purpose. When you achieve a score of 9,800 points in Ultimate Custom Night, completing the incredibly difficult 4920 mode, where 49 animatronics are set to difficulty level 20, a cutscene plays. It shows Golden Freddy in his classic form from the first game, not withered, but the original slumped figure, twitching violently in complete darkness before slowly fading away. The twitching is reminiscent of Springtrap's twitching in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 trailer, suggesting a soul, refusing to let go, fighting against release or consumed by rage that won't dissipate. This cutscene, brief and cryptic as it is, confirms Golden Freddy's central importance to Ultimate Custom Night's narrative, while maintaining the ambiguity about his exact nature and ultimate fate. There's also a unique mechanic in Ultimate Custom Night, related to Golden Freddy and Fredbear. If you set Golden Freddy's AI to 1, and all other characters to 0, essentially creating a scenario where he's the only active threat, you can use the Death Coin item on him. The Death Coin is supposed to permanently remove an animatronic from play, but using it on Golden Freddy doesn't remove him. Instead, it triggers an immediate jump scare from Fredbear, the purple-hatted version from the diner, with his eyes glowing and his appearance more aggressive than the stage 0-1 depiction. This mechanic suggests a connection between Golden Freddy and Fredbear that goes beyond simple reuse of a suit, implying they're aspects of the same entity, or that Fredbear represents the original form that Golden Freddy emerged from. The fact that you can't truly kill or remove Golden Freddy, that attempting to do so only triggers a different but equally deadly manifestation, reinforces his nature as something beyond mechanical, beyond mortal, beyond the rules that govern everyone and everything else. Five Nights at Freddy's VR, Help Wanted, interestingly, doesn't feature Golden Freddy directly, despite including recreations of scenes from the first 3 games. His absence is conspicuous, as if the developers couldn't or chose not to incorporate his reality-breaking characteristics into the virtual reality environment. Perhaps Golden Freddy's ability to crash games and appear impossibly couldn't translate to VR without breaking the experience entirely. Or perhaps his absence is thematically appropriate, suggesting that Golden Freddy exists outside even the digital recreations of events, too powerful or too otherworldly to be contained in Fazbear Entertainment's sanitized versions of their own horrors. In Five Nights at Freddy's AR Special Delivery, Golden Freddy finally receives a fully golden polished appearance, his teeth gleaming gold, his suit brighter and shinier than in previous incarnations while maintaining those empty eye sockets. His mechanic in the mobile game is unique, combining elements from multiple other animatronics to create an encounter that's considered one of the most difficult in the game. The Dark Circus Encore DLC introduced a skin called Great Escape Golden Freddy, which shows the animatronic bound by chains, locks and weights, covered in water damage as if he's been submerged. The accompanying trailer depicts this Golden Freddy in a water tank, screaming silently and struggling against his bonds, unable to escape despite his fury. This imagery connects to the Old Man Consequences minigame from Ultimate Custom Night, where drowning in a red lake is suggested as a way to finally let go, to rest. The Great Escape skin visualizes this concept, showing Golden Freddy trapped by his own inability to move on, bound by rage and vengeance that won't allow release even when escape is possible. The way Golden Freddy appears, disappears, and manifests across these games establishes him as fundamentally different from other animatronics. He's not bound by geography or mechanics. He exists as a presence, a phenomenon, something that uses the image of a golden bear to interact with the physical world, but isn't limited by that image. He can be in multiple places at once, as evidenced by his appearance in the Save the minigame, while also lurking in the office. He can affect the game itself, crashing programs and triggering events that shouldn't be possible within the normal parameters of the software. And he's associated, again and again, with the supernatural, with possession and vengeance, and the inability to move on, with spirits trapped in a cycle they can't or won't escape. Each appearance adds new dimensions while maintaining core characteristics. The slumped posture, the empty eyes, the sense of wrongness, of something that shouldn't be but undeniably is. Golden Freddy doesn't hunt like the other animatronics. He doesn't follow patrol routes or movement patterns. He simply is, appearing when certain conditions are met, or when he chooses to, as if the normal rules of causality don't fully apply to him. This consistent inconsistency, this pattern of breaking patterns, is what makes Golden Freddy such an effective horror element and such a compelling mystery. He's the glitch in the system, the anomaly that refuses explanation, the presence that lingers at the edges of every game even when he's not directly visible. And understanding his manifestations, his behaviors, his unique characteristics across different games brings us closer to understanding what he represents in the lore, what purpose he serves, and why his identity has remained so deliberately obscured for so long. Ultimate Custom Night stands as perhaps the most crucial game for understanding Golden Freddy's nature and purpose, because it's here that the Golden Bear's role expands beyond mere antagonist or Easter egg into something far more significant. This game, released in 2018 as a free standalone title following Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, presents itself as the ultimate challenge, a customizable nightmare where players can set the difficulty level of 50 animatronics from across the franchise, creating scenarios ranging from trivially easy to effectively impossible. But beneath this gameplay premise lies a narrative layer that recontextualizes everything, suggesting that Ultimate Custom Night isn't just a game but a story being told, a punishment being inflicted, a hell custom-tailored for one specific individual who deserves every moment of torment. The evidence that Ultimate Custom Night represents William Afton's personal purgatory is substantial. Voice lines from multiple animatronics reference the player directly, addressing them as someone who committed specific crimes, someone who killed children, someone who deserves this endless cycle of death and resurrection. Characters speak of the one you should not have killed, implying the player killed multiple people, but one in particular was a mistake that's now being avenged. The puppet, possessed by Charlie Emily, William Afton's first victim, speaks directly to him, saying, "I recognize you, but I'm not afraid of you, not anymore," acknowledging their shared history, while asserting that the power dynamic has shifted. Even William Afton's own spring-locked form, Scraptrap, appears as an antagonist, forcing him to confront himself, to face what he's become. The framing becomes clearer when we consider the Fazbear Fright story, The Man in Room 1280, which describes William Afton in a hospital bed, kept alive against all medical logic by something supernatural, tormented by nightmares so vivid that nurses and doctors can't explain his continued existence. The story makes explicit what Ultimate Custom Night implies, that Afton is trapped in a nightmare of his own creation, unable to die but unable to live, forced to experience an endless cycle of horror orchestrated by one of his victims. This vengeful spirit, referred to throughout Ultimate Custom Night as the one you should not have killed, or simply the one, speaks through the mediocre melodies, animatronics in rare voice lines that appear to be possessed, overtaken by a different personality than the character's normal behavior suggests. Ned Bear whispers, "This is how it feels," and you get to experience it over and over and over again, forever. "I will never let you leave." Happy Frog says, "I've always been a happy frog, but after you threw my soul in a lake of fire and frolicked with it in my torment, I became a frog with a lot of repressed rage." Orville Elephant declares, "He tried to release you. He tried to release us. But I'm not going to let that happen. I will hold you here. I will keep you here, no matter how many times they burn us." These lines, delivered in a whisper beneath the characters' normal voices, reveal the vengeful spirit's intentions and methods, confirming that the nightmare is deliberate, maintained by someone who refuses to let Afton escape through death or any other means. The face of the one you should not have killed occasionally flashes on screen during Ultimate Custom Night, visible in doorways, in the darkness, on the game over screen. It's a haunting image, a young face with blonde hair and a vacant expression that's been edited to appear unnatural, disturbing in ways that are hard to articulate. The face belongs to Jason Cawthon, Scott Cawthon's son, used here not to represent the son, but simply as a placeholder image that could be edited to look supernatural. Scott has clarified that the face itself doesn't matter for lore purposes, that using his son's face was simply a practical choice, and we shouldn't read significance into whose face was used. However, the edits made to the face, making it look wrong and unsettling, do carry meaning, representing how the vengeful spirit appears to William Afton in his nightmare, a reminder of innocence destroyed, of childhood ended by murder. The voice associated with this face, provided by actress Tabitha Skanes, is deliberately ambiguous in gender, whispered and androgynous in a way that makes it impossible to determine if the speaker is male or female. This ambiguity was intentional according to the casting call, which specified that the voice should work for either a young boy or young girl, and that the gender shouldn't be immediately clear. This has fueled endless debate about the vengeful spirit's identity, because if we can't determine gender from the voice or face, we have to rely on other evidence, and that evidence points in multiple directions depending on which clues we prioritize. So who is the one you should not have killed. Who is this vengeful spirit with enough power to trap William Afton in an eternal nightmare, to orchestrate the appearance of 50 animatronics from across space and time, to prevent even Henry Emily's carefully planned fire from granting Afton the release of death? The most prominent theory, supported by substantial evidence, is that the vengeful spirit is Golden Freddy, or more specifically, the soul-possessing Golden Freddy. The 9,800-point cutscene showing Golden Freddy twitching in darkness serves as the smoking gun, directly associating the Golden Bear with the role of tormentor, with the creation and maintenance of this nightmare. The cutscene is eerily similar to Springtrap's twitching in the Five Nights at Freddy's 3 trailer, suggesting the same kind of restless, refusing to move on energy, the same inability to let go even when release is possible. Golden Freddy's behavior in the game itself also supports this theory. Despite being a selectable animatronic that the player can include in their custom challenge, Golden Freddy operates differently from everyone else. Using a death coin on him, which should remove him from play, instead triggers Fredbear's jump scare, suggesting that Golden Freddy can't be killed or removed because he's not just another antagonist, but the architect of the entire scenario. He's running the show, and you can't escape him by eliminating him as a threat because he exists on a different level from the threats you're supposed to be managing. The Old Man Consequences Easter egg provides another crucial piece of evidence. This secret minigame, accessible by setting Old Man Consequences to difficulty 1 and all other characters to 0, then catching a specific fish, shows a red bear sprite, generally interpreted as Golden Freddy given the color and context, wandering through a forest before encountering Old Man Consequences fishing by a red lake. Old Man Consequences tells the bear, "Leave the demon to his demons. Rest your own soul. There is nothing else." This is clearly advice, a suggestion that the vengeful spirit should let go of William Afton, should stop tormenting him and finally move on to whatever rest awaits. The fact that this message is being delivered to someone who appears as a Freddy variant strongly suggests that Golden Freddy is the one, that he's the spirit maintaining the nightmare. If you make the bear sprite jump into the red lake, the game crashes, exactly as Golden Freddy's involvement typically causes crashes in other games. This crash could represent the spirit finally drowning himself, finally accepting release. Or it could represent the impossibility of truly letting go, the fact that even attempting to move on causes a system failure because the rage and pain are too fundamental to the spirit's existence to simply abandon. The ambiguity is intentional, leaving room for interpretation about whether the vengeful spirit eventually does find peace or remains locked in this cycle of torment forever. But here's where things get complicated, because while the evidence strongly suggests Golden Freddy is the vengeful spirit, the Fazbear Frights books introduce a wrinkle. In The Man in Room 1280, the spirit tormenting William Afton in his hospital nightmare is identified as a boy named Andrew. Andrew appears throughout the Stitch Wraith epilogues as one of two spirits possessing the Stitch Wraith animatronic, the other being a boy named Jake. Andrew's backstory, revealed gradually through these stories, shows him to be one of William Afton's victims who attached his spirit to Afton's body after the man's springlock failure, refusing to let him die, keeping him alive in agony as a form of eternal punishment. This parallels the role of the one you should not have killed perfectly, suggesting that Andrew and the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night are the same character, or at least that Andrew fills that role in the book's continuity. So is Andrew the spirit in Golden Freddy, Or is Andrew a separate character entirely? Are the books meant to provide answers for the games, or are they parallel stories with similar themes but different specifics? Scott Cawthon has stated that the Fazbear Fright stories are designed to fill in gaps in the game's lore, to provide context and clarification for elements that remain ambiguous in the games themselves. But he's also been clear that the stories aren't direct one-to-one translations, that book characters aren't necessarily the exact same as game characters, even when they serve similar functions. This ambiguity creates a situation where we can use Andrew's story to inform our understanding of the vengeful spirit, without necessarily concluding that they're the same person. The pronoun usage in Ultimate Custom Night adds another layer to this debate. Withered Chica and Mangle both refer to the one you should not have killed, using masculine pronouns, calling the vengeful spirit he and him. This supports the Andrew theory, since Andrew is definitely male in the books, but it conflicts with other evidence about Golden Freddy's possessor. If Cassidy is the spirit in Golden Freddy, and if most sources describe Cassidy as female, then why would Ultimate Custom Night use masculine pronouns for the vengeful spirit? Some argue that Cassidy is actually male in the games even though she's female in the novels, that the name is being used for different characters in different continuities. Others suggest that the pronoun usage is another intentional obfuscation, that Scott deliberately chose masculine pronouns to mislead or to maintain ambiguity about the spirit's identity. The casting call's emphasis on gender ambiguity supports this interpretation, suggesting that we're not meant to determine the spirit's gender definitively, but rather to sit with the uncertainty, to accept that this is one mystery that won't be cleanly solved. There's also the possibility, which we'll explore more deeply in the next section, that multiple spirits are involved in Golden Freddy's possession, that the vengeful spirit is one of multiple consciousnesses sharing the Golden Bear suit, and that the pronoun confusion stems from different spirits being active or dominant at different times. If both Cassidy and the crying child possess Golden Freddy, and if one is male and one is female, then references could be pointing to different individuals depending on context. Ultimate Custom Night ultimately leaves us with a Golden Freddy who is powerful, vengeful, and central to the game's narrative purpose, while remaining frustratingly ambiguous in terms of specific identity. We know Golden Freddy, or the spirit within, has the power to create and maintain an elaborate nightmare for William Afton. We know this spirit refuses to move on, refuses to let Afton escape through death or any other means, is consumed by a rage so profound that even being offered peace by old man consequences can't break the cycle. We know that of all the spirits William Afton destroyed, this one in particular has claimed the role of primary tormentor, has taken responsibility for ensuring Afton never finds relief from his crimes. Whether that spirit is Cassidy alone, or the crying child alone, or both together, or someone else entirely like Andrew from the books, the game deliberately doesn't confirm. What it does confirm is that Golden Freddy, whatever combination of souls and identities that name represents, is the most important spirit in terms of the franchise's resolution, the one who holds William Afton accountable when everyone else has moved on, the one whose refusal to find peace becomes the mechanism through which the series' greatest villain receives the closest thing to justice that this dark universe allows. The theory that has gained the most traction in recent years regarding Golden Freddy's possession is called Golden Duo, sometimes referred to as Golden Both, and it proposes something that seems unusual in the context of Five Nights at Freddy's, but that finds support in multiple sources. The idea is simple but profound. Golden Freddy isn't possessed by a single spirit, but by two. Cassidy, the fifth victim of the missing children incident, and the crying child, the boy who died from the bite of 83. Both souls, both consciousnesses, somehow sharing the same animatronic form, coexisting within the Golden Bear suit in a way that would explain many of Golden Freddy's contradictory characteristics and ambiguous behaviors. This theory emerged from several converging lines of evidence, each compelling on its own, but together forming a picture that's hard to dismiss. The foundation for Golden Duo comes from the survival logbook, which we've already discussed in terms of revealing Cassidy's name, but the full implications of that book extend further. The conversation taking place within its pages, the faded text asking questions, and the altered text providing answers, suggest two different entities communicating with each other. Cassidy asks, "What do you see?" and receives the answer, "I can't see." She asks, "Does he still talk to you?" referencing the Fredbear plush that spoke to the crying child. And the implication is that someone is confirming that yes, the plush did talk, that this was part of their experience. Most tellingly, Cassidy writes, "The party was for you," and the response is, "It was for me," confirming that the other entity in this conversation experienced a party, specifically the party at Fredbear's family diner, where the bite of 83 occurred. If Cassidy is asking questions about events she didn't experience, and if someone else is answering based on memories that are specifically associated with the crying child, then both must be present, both must be able to interact with the logbook, both must exist in a shared space where communication between them is possible. The way these two entities manipulate the logbook is different, suggesting they have different capabilities or different levels of influence. Cassidy uses faded text, barely visible, requiring close examination to detect. The crying child alters existing text, changing words and numbers in ways that blend with the logbook's original design. Harder to spot, but more integrated with the physical object. This difference in methodology might reflect their different relationships to the physical world, their different states of possession or awareness. Perhaps Cassidy, having died in a more straightforward murder, has a different kind of connection to the Golden Bear suit than the crying child, who died in a hospital after a prolonged period in a coma, whose relationship to Fredbear and death and consciousness is more complicated and traumatic. The phrase, "It's me," which appears throughout the logbook and throughout Golden Freddy's appearances in the games, takes on new meaning under Golden Duo. It's not just one spirit trying to communicate identity, but potentially two, both saying, "It's me," both claiming connection to the Golden Bear, both asserting their presence in a form that's too small, too limited, to fully contain both of their consciousnesses without overlap and confusion. When Golden Freddy appears in the first game, and the words "It's me" flash on screen, maybe it's both spirits simultaneously trying to be recognized, trying to make the night guard understand who they are, creating that repetitive, almost desperate quality to the message that appears across multiple rooms, multiple cameras, multiple moments throughout the night. The biggest piece of evidence supporting Golden Duo comes from the Fazbear Fright stories, specifically the Stitch Wraith epilogues. The Stitch Wraith is an animatronic that's explicitly possessed by two spirits, Andrew and Jake, two boys who died under different circumstances, but whose souls ended up sharing the same endoskeleton body. The stories show how these two spirits interact, how they have different goals and perspectives, how one can be dominant while the other is more passive, how they communicate with each other despite being trapped in the same form. This confirmed that dual possession is possible in the Five Nights at Freddy's universe, that multiple souls can inhabit a single animatronic, and it provided a clear parallel for understanding how Golden Freddy might function if he's similarly possessed by two spirits. The Stitch Wraith is also interesting because one of the spirits, Jake, inhabits the head section, while Andrew inhabits the power source, giving them different perspectives and different abilities. Jake can see, but Andrew can't, which mirrors the crying child's statement in the survival logbook that "I can't see," suggesting that maybe the dual possession in Golden Freddy follows a similar pattern, with one spirit having certain capabilities and the other having different ones. Andrew in the Stitch Wraith is the more vengeful, angry spirit, the one who refuses to move on, while Jake is more innocent, more willing to help others and eventually find peace. This dynamic of vengeful and innocent, of one spirit seeking revenge while the other seeks something else, could map onto Cassidy and the crying child, with Cassidy being the vengeful spirit who creates ultimate custom night, and the crying child being a more passive presence who just wants to be reunited with his family, to be put back together, as the Fredbear plush promised. The week before, a recent official novel provides additional support for Golden Duo by depicting an incident where Phone Guy, named Ralph in the novel, experiences something strange related to the bite of 83. He listens to a recording of the bite, hearing the crunch and the crying, and when the recording ends, he still hears crying, suggesting a spirit is present. Spirit is. When he turns around, he sees something, hears another crunch, and the implication is clear that he's encountered Golden Freddy or Fredbear, that the spirit or spirits associated with that animatronic are still present, still bound to the location where the bite occurred. The persistent crying connects to the crying child, but the presence of a Golden Bear animatronic connects to the broader Golden Freddy mystery, supporting the idea that the crying child's spirit does inhabit some version of Fredbear or Golden Freddy after his death. But Golden Duo faces significant challenges and counter-arguments. One of the main issues is the question of when and how both spirits would have entered Golden Freddy. The crying child died in a hospital in 1983, far from Fredbear's family diner, without any clear mechanism for his soul to have possessed the animatronic. Some theories suggest his agony, the intense emotional and physical pain of his death, somehow infected or attached to Fredbear across the distance. That possession in Five Nights at Freddy's doesn't require physical proximity at the moment of death, but can occur through emotional connection to an object or place. Others argue that the crying child's spirit remained in a liminal state, existing in the nightmare realm depicted in Five Nights at Freddy's 4, only later finding its way into Golden Freddy through some process we haven't seen explained. Cassidy, meanwhile, died in 1985 during the missing children incident, and we see the puppet giving life to the 5 victims, placing masks on their faces to awaken them in the animatronic suits. But the 5th child, the one associated with Golden Freddy, has a different experience in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame, with the process cutting to static and Golden Freddy's jump scare before we see a mask being placed. This ambiguity could suggest that the puppet's gift didn't work the same way for the 5th child because the suit was already occupied, because the crying child's spirit was already present, creating a dual possession scenario when Cassidy's soul attempted to inhabit the same form. Another challenge to Golden Duo is the Happiest Day minigame from Five Nights at Freddy's 3, which shows a child in a Golden Freddy mask, receiving a cake and then disappearing, their mask falling away as they move on. If 2 spirits possess Golden Freddy, why does Happiest Day show only one child being freed. Does this mean only one spirit moved on while the other remained? Or does it mean Happiest Day represents both spirits moving on together, with the single child being a symbolic representation of their shared release? Some interpretations suggest that the crying child moves on in Happiest Day while Cassidy remains, refusing to leave as long as William Afton still exists to be punished, which would explain why Golden Freddy appears as the vengeful spirit in Ultimate Custom Night, while also having been freed in the good ending. The identity ambiguity that we've seen throughout the franchise, the contradictory pronouns, the unclear gender, the way different sources point to different conclusions, all makes more sense under Golden Duo. If two spirits share Golden Freddy, with one being male and one being female, then of course we'd see both masculine and feminine indicators, both male and female characteristics, because we're looking at two different individuals whose identities blur together when examined through the lens of a shared animatronic form. The laugh in the first game could be Cassidy, while the pronouns in Ultimate Custom Night could reference the crying child, or vice versa, creating the confusion that fans have struggled with for years. The power Golden Freddy displays, the ability to appear impossibly, to affect the game itself, to exist in multiple locations and create elaborate nightmares, seems disproportionate for a single spirit. But if two souls are present, if their combined energy or combined will is channeled through the Golden Bear form, then maybe that explains the heightened supernatural abilities, the way Golden Freddy operates on a different level from the other possessed animatronics, who only have single spirits driving them. Two consciousnesses might generate enough power to transcend normal limits, to create the reality-bending effects we associate with Golden Freddy's appearances. Golden Duo also provides an elegant explanation for why Golden Freddy's design doesn't have an endoskeleton, or appears to lack one in most of his manifestations. If he's not a functioning animatronic, but rather a suit that spirits are using as a vessel, a form they're projecting into rather than animating from within, then the absence of mechanical components makes sense. He doesn't need servos and gears because he's not moving mechanically. He's moving supernaturally, and the suit is just the shape that the spirits have chosen, or been bound to, the image through which they make themselves visible and tangible to the living. However, it's important to note that Golden Duo remains a theory, not confirmed canon. Scott Cawthon has never explicitly stated that two spirits possess Golden Freddy, and while the evidence is substantial and persuasive, it's not definitive. Alternative theories exist, and some fans argue strongly for single spirit possession, believing that either Cassidy alone or the crying child alone inhabits Golden Freddy, and that the contradictory evidence can be explained through other means: timeline confusion, gender ambiguity in character design, or the separate continuities of books and games providing different answers to the same question. But Golden Duo has become the dominant interpretation in the community for good reason. It explains more of the evidence more comprehensively than competing theories. It accounts for the survival logbook conversation, for the Stitch Wraith parallel, for the gender confusion, for the exceptional power Golden Freddy displays, for the connection to both the Bite of 83 and the Missing Children incident, for the appearance of both vengefulness and innocence in different contexts. It's a theory that brings coherence to chaos, that takes all the scattered, contradictory pieces of the Golden Freddy puzzle and arranges them into a picture that, while not perfectly clear, is at least recognizable as something intentional rather than random. And in a franchise that thrives on ambiguity and hidden meanings, where theories are meant to be built and debated rather than definitively proven. Golden Duo represents the community's best effort to understand one of Scott Cawthon's most complex creations, a character who has remained an enigma for over a decade and shows no signs of revealing all his secrets anytime soon. While Cassidy and the Crying Child have emerged as the leading candidates for Golden Freddy's possession, they're not the only spirits that theories have associated with the Golden Bear. The debate has expanded over the years to include alternative possibilities, each with their own supporting evidence, and each adding another layer of complexity to an already convoluted mystery. Let's examine these alternatives and consider why they've gained traction even as Golden Duo has become the predominant theory. Andrew, as we've mentioned, comes from the Fazbear Frights books, and specifically from The Man in Room 1280 and the Stitch Wraith epilogues. He's explicitly described as a victim of William Afton, who becomes a vengeful spirit, attaching himself to Afton's burned, barely living body to keep him in a state of perpetual torment. Andrew's role in the book's parallels the one you should not have killed, from Ultimate Custom Night so closely that many fans believe Andrew is Scott Cawthon's way of revealing the vengeful spirit's identity through the books. Andrew is described as a young boy with curly black hair, and interestingly, in the story In the Flesh, a character who might be Andrew is associated with Golden Freddy, suggesting a connection between this spirit and the Golden Bear even in the book continuity. The blonde face that flashes in Ultimate Custom Night, if you reverse the colors and adjust for lighting, bears some resemblance to descriptions of Andrew, particularly if you account for artistic interpretation and the way book descriptions translate to visual representation. Some theories propose that Andrew is the game version of the vengeful spirit, that Cassidy and Andrew are the same character just with different names in different continuities, or that Andrew exists in the games as a separate entity who also possessed Golden Freddy at some point, creating a three-spirit scenario that's even more complicated than Golden Duo. The argument for Andrew as the vengeful spirit is strengthened by the masculine pronouns used in Ultimate Custom Night and by the stated purpose of the Fazbear Frights books, which is to fill in gaps in the game's lore. If the identity of the one you should not have killed was meant to remain ambiguous in the games alone, perhaps the books were always intended to provide the answer. Andrew is that answer, and his story of attachment to William Afton, of refusing to let him die, of creating or contributing to the nightmare that is Ultimate Custom Night, maps perfectly onto the vengeful spirit's role. However, the Andrew theory faces challenges. The survival logbook, which is definitively connected to the game's lore rather than existing in a separate book continuity, points to Cassidy, not Andrew. The name Cassidy is hidden in the logbook's puzzles, and the phrase "it's me" connects that name to Golden Freddy. If Andrew were the Golden Bear's primary inhabitant, why would the logbook point us toward Cassidy? Some argue that Cassidy and Andrew could both be present, another version of dual possession, though this creates the question of what happened to the Crying Child in that scenario. Others suggest that Cassidy is the name in the games, while Andrew is the book equivalent, parallel characters serving the same function in different continuities, and we shouldn't try to merge them into a single explanation. This interpretation treats the books as illuminating themes and concepts without being literal guides to game events, which aligns with some of Scott's statements about the relationship between book and game continuities, but contradicts other statements about the books filling in specific gaps. Then there's Kelsey, a character from the Fazbear Fright story, The New Kid, and he presents one of the strangest possibilities in the Golden Freddy debate. In the story, a boy named Kelsey appears seemingly out of nowhere, befriends the protagonist Devon, and eventually gets spring-locked inside the Golden Freddy suit during what was supposed to be a prank. When Devon returns a week later to check on Kelsey's body, he finds that Kelsey has vanished, and the story implies that Kelsey might have been a manifestation of Golden Freddy himself, a physical form that the spirit or animatronic created to lure someone into experiencing the same death that previous victims had suffered. This suggests that Golden Freddy, or the spirit within, has the power to create physical manifestations, to appear as a human being, which would explain some of his reality-bending abilities in the games. Some theories propose that Kelsey is now trapped in Golden Freddy, along with whoever was already there, adding yet another spirit to the mix. Others argue that Kelsey was never a real person to begin with, that he was always just an extension of Golden Freddy, a projection rather than a possessor. The Kelsey theory is less popular than Andrew or Golden Duo theories because the evidence connecting him to the games is thinner, more speculative. But he represents an interesting possibility, the idea that Golden Freddy isn't just possessed by one or two specific spirits, but might be a repository for multiple victims, a suit that attracts or accumulates souls in ways that make him fundamentally different from the other possessed animatronics. Michael Brooks, the spirit possessing Golden Freddy in the Silver Eyes novel trilogy, offers yet another identity, though most fans agree that the novels exist in a separate continuity and that Michael Brooks in the books doesn't necessarily tell us anything about Golden Freddy in the games. Still, his presence in the novels establishes precedent for Golden Freddy being a young male victim of William Afton, for the Golden Bear being one of the more important and powerful possessed animatronics, for Golden Freddy having a central role in the revenge the spirits ultimately take on their killer. The characterization of Michael Brooks as someone who can appear and disappear, who has unusual control over his animatronic form, mirrors Golden Freddy's behavior in the games, suggesting that even across continuities, certain core characteristics remain consistent. There's also the bizarre theory, less widely accepted but worth mentioning, that Phone Guy somehow became part of Golden Freddy's possession after his death in the original game. This theory points to the Tumblr post-analysis, suggesting that Phone Guy's death scene includes Golden Freddy's roar, that Phone Guy's spirit might have joined the Golden Bear after being killed, explaining why certain Easter eggs require phone pad inputs, why the logbook that contains Cassidy's clues was written for security guards like Phone Guy. This theory doesn't have much supporting evidence beyond these tenuous connections, and most fans dismiss it as reaching too far. But it illustrates how desperate the community has become to explain Golden Freddy's contradictions, how willing theorists are to consider increasingly complex scenarios of multiple possessions and accumulated spirits just to account for all the strange, conflicting evidence this one character presents. Each alternative theory has moments where it seems to fit perfectly, where certain pieces of evidence align and suggest that maybe, just maybe, this is the answer we've been searching for. Andrew explains Ultimate Custom Night's masculine pronouns and the vengeful spirit's motivation. Kelsey explains Golden Freddy's ability to manifest physically and lure people to their doom. Michael Brooks provides a template for Golden Freddy's characterization across continuities. The Phone Guy theory, however unlikely, would explain some of the meta-elements and security guard connections. But none of these alternatives has the comprehensive explanatory power of Golden Duo, which accounts for the survival logbook evidence, the dual possession precedent from the Stitch Wraith, the gender ambiguity, the connection to both 1983 and 1985, the balance of vengefulness and innocence, the exceptional supernatural abilities. This is why Golden Duo has become the dominant theory even while alternatives persist in corners of the community, debated by those who see different patterns in the same evidence or who weight certain clues more heavily than others. The existence of these alternatives also highlights something important about the Golden Freddy mystery, which is that it's designed to resist singular interpretation. Scott Cawthon has deliberately created a scenario where multiple answers seem possible, where evidence points in different directions depending on how you weight it, where certainty is impossible because the clues themselves are contradictory. This frustrates those who want definitive answers, who want the law to be solvable like a math problem with one correct solution. But it delights those who see theories as explorations rather than destinations, who enjoy the debate and discussion, who find meaning in the ambiguity itself rather than in the resolution of that ambiguity. Golden Freddy works as a horror element precisely because he's not fully explained. The moment we definitively know who possesses him, what his purpose is, how he came to be, some of the terror dissipates. The unknown is scarier than the known. The glitch in the system is more disturbing than a system we fully understand. And so maybe the existence of multiple compelling theories, of Andrew and Kelsey, and the crying child, and Cassidy, all remaining possibilities, is exactly the point. Maybe we're not meant to choose one theory and dismiss the others, but rather to hold them all simultaneously, to accept that Golden Freddy is Andrew in one sense and Cassidy in another, and the crying child in a third sense, that these identities aren't mutually exclusive, but rather different facets of the same phenomenon, different ways of articulating a truth that can't be fully captured by any single name or story. This isn't a cop-out or a failure to solve the mystery. It's an acknowledgement that some mysteries in Five Nights at Freddy's are structured to remain mysteries, to provoke thought and discussion, rather than to be definitively concluded. And Golden Freddy, more than any other character in the franchise, embodies this deliberate unsolvability, this commitment to keeping certain questions forever open, forever generating new theories and interpretations as new games and books add new pieces to a puzzle that may never be complete. One of the most persistent sources of confusion in the Golden Freddy debate centers on gender, and this confusion is neither accidental nor easily resolved. Different pieces of evidence point toward different conclusions about whether Golden Freddy, or the spirit or spirits within, should be understood as male, female, or something more ambiguous. Let's trace these contradictions carefully, because they're central to understanding why the community has struggled for so long to definitively identify Golden Freddy's possessor. In the original Five Nights at Freddy's, when Golden Freddy appears in the office, after the poster changes, the sound that accompanies his manifestation is a young girl's laugh. This is clear, unambiguous feminine vocalization, suggesting that the spirit possessing the golden bear is female. Many players, encountering this for the first time, assumed they had their answer. Golden Freddy is possessed by a girl, one of the murdered children, and her ghostly laugh is an attempt to communicate or simply an echo of childhood happiness that's been twisted by death and possession. This seemed straightforward until later games and supplementary materials introduced contradictory information. In Ultimate Custom Night, multiple animatronics referred to the one you should not have killed, using masculine pronouns. Withered Chica says, I have seen everything. I have seen him, the one you shouldn't have killed. Mangle states, he's here and always watching, the one you shouldn't have killed. These lines use he and him, clearly indicating a male identity for the vengeful spirit, who is strongly implied to be Golden Freddy, or the primary consciousness within Golden Freddy. This creates immediate conflict with the girl's laugh from the first game. How can the same entity be both female, as suggested by the laugh, and male, as stated by characters who apparently know the vengeful spirit's identity? The audition call for the vengeful spirit's voice in Ultimate Custom Night adds another dimension to this confusion. Scott Cawthon specifically requested a voice that could work for either a young boy or a young girl, with gender not being immediately clear. The actor was explicitly told they could lean toward either gender in their performance, suggesting that the ambiguity was intentional rather than an oversight. The voice that was ultimately chosen and used in the game is whispered, androgynous, difficult to pass in terms of gender, fulfilling the brief perfectly. This deliberate ambiguity suggests several possibilities. Maybe Scott wanted to hide the spirit's gender to prevent easy identification, to keep the mystery alive by removing what would otherwise be a straightforward clue. Maybe the spirit's gender genuinely isn't important to their role in the story, and Scott wanted to de-emphasize it as a factor in determining identity. Or maybe, and this aligns with Golden Duo, the ambiguity reflects multiple spirits with different genders, making it impossible to assign a single gender to Golden Freddy as an entity, because Golden Freddy represents more than one individual. The survival logbook adds to the confusion, because Cassidy, the name we discover through its puzzles, is gender neutral. In modern usage, Cassidy can be given to any gender, though it's more commonly used for girls. But this doesn't definitively tell us whether the Cassidy possessing Golden Freddy is male or female. In the Fourth Closet novel, Cassidy is explicitly described as female, a young girl with long black hair. But as we've established, the novels exist in a different continuity, and character details from the books don't necessarily apply to the games. A female Cassidy in the novels doesn't confirm a female Cassidy in the games, especially when game evidence points in multiple directions. Meanwhile, the crying child is definitively male. If Golden Duo is correct and both Cassidy and the crying child possess Golden Freddy, then we have at least one male spirit present, which would explain the masculine pronouns in Ultimate Custom Night, while the female laugh might represent Cassidy's presence. But this only works if we accept dual possession, and it requires us to believe that sometimes the games emphasize one spirit's characteristics, while at other times emphasizing the others, creating the apparent contradiction. Andrew, from the Fazbear Frights books, is unambiguously male, a young boy explicitly referred to with masculine pronouns throughout the stories. If Andrew is meant to be the book version of the vengeful spirit, and if we're supposed to use book lore to fill gaps in game lore, then Andrew's male identity would support the masculine pronouns in Ultimate Custom Night and suggest that the vengeful spirit, and by extension the primary or most important consciousness in Golden Freddy, is male. But this conflicts with the girl's laugh in the first game, unless we dismiss that laugh as a stock sound effect not intended to convey lore information about gender, which some fans argue but others vehemently reject. The face that appears in Ultimate Custom Night, Jason Cawthon's edited face used to represent the vengeful spirit, appears masculine to most viewers, with short blonde hair and facial features that read as male. Scott has stated that the specific face doesn't matter, that using his son's face was simply a practical choice, and we shouldn't analyze whose face was used. But he also said that the edits made to the face do matter, which implies that the visual presentation of the vengeful spirit carries some intentional meaning. If the face is meant to appear male, that's another data point suggesting masculine identity. But it's a weak data point, given Scott's comments about the face's irrelevance, leaving us in the familiar territory of ambiguity. Some theories attempt to resolve the gender confusion by suggesting that possession in Five Nights at Freddy's isn't strictly gendered, that spirits inhabiting animatronic bodies might not present gender in conventional ways, that the spirit's original human gender might not correspond to how that spirit manifests or communicates after death. This interpretation treats gender as fluid or irrelevant in the context of supernatural possession, which is an interesting metaphysical angle but doesn't have strong support in the game's presentation of other possessed animatronics, who generally seem to maintain gender characteristics associated with their human identities. Gabriel in Freddy, Jeremy in Bonnie, these seem to be straightforward male spirits in male-coded animatronics without the kind of confusion we see with Golden Freddy. The gender debate matters because names and pronouns are among our few concrete clues about identity. And if we can't trust those clues, if they're deliberately contradictory or ambiguous, then we lose major tools for solving the mystery. This is frustrating from a lore-solving perspective, but from a narrative and thematic perspective, it's brilliant. The gender ambiguity ensures that no one can point to a single piece of evidence and declare the mystery solved. It forces us to engage with the character more deeply, to consider multiple possibilities, to acknowledge that our understanding is incomplete. It also creates space for diverse interpretations, allowing different readers and players to connect with Golden Freddy in different ways, based on which evidence they find most compelling. For some, Golden Freddy is Cassidy, a young girl whose rage transcends death. For others, Golden Freddy is the crying child, a traumatized boy seeking reunion with his family. For still others, Golden Freddy is Andrew, the book spirit whose vengeance defines ultimate custom night. And under Golden Duo, Golden Freddy is all of these simultaneously, a compositional entity whose gender ambiguity reflects the multiple identities combined within a single form. Perhaps the most honest answer to what is Golden Freddy's gender is it's complicated, not because the games haven't provided evidence, but because the evidence deliberately contradicts itself, pointing toward multiple genders simultaneously, or toward gender as an unstable category when applied to spirits existing in multiple states of possession, memory, and manifestation. This complexity might feel like a failure to commit to a clear answer, but in a franchise built on mystery and interpretation, it's perhaps the most appropriate answer possible. Golden Freddy remains undefined, resisting categorization, existing in a liminal space between male and female, between one spirit and many, between confirmed and theoretical, eternally ambiguous in ways that ensure discussions about his identity will continue for as long as fans engage with Five Nights at Freddy's lore. After examining all the evidence, all the theories, all the contradictions and ambiguities that surround Golden Freddy, we're left with a collection of questions that remain stubbornly unanswered despite years of analysis and investigation. These aren't gaps that future games might fill, or mysteries that clever theorists might crack. These are fundamental aspects of Golden Freddy's design that Scott Cawthon appears to have deliberately left open, either because the ambiguity serves a purpose, or because committing to definitive answers would undermine what makes the character work. Let's examine these lingering questions, not to frustrate but to appreciate the craft of creating a mystery that sustains interest across a decade and multiple games. First and most, obviously, who exactly possesses Golden Freddy? Is it Cassidy alone, a single, vengeful spirit powerful enough to trap William Afton in eternal torment? Is it the crying child alone, the boy whose death in 1983 set so much tragedy in motion? Is it both simultaneously in the dual possession suggested by Golden Duo? Is it Andrew from the books, serving the same role in game continuity under a different name or appearance? Or is it someone else entirely, a spirit we haven't identified yet, because the clues are too scattered or too subtle for us to have connected them? Each answer has supporting evidence. Each answer faces contradictions. And Scott has never confirmed which, if any, is correct, leaving the community in a state of permanent theoretical limbo, where arguments persist because no position can be definitively proven wrong. Related to this is the question of Golden Freddy's relationship to Fredbear. Are they the same character, the same physical suit, at different points in time, or in different states of use? Are they separate but related, two different Golden Bear suits that coexisted at Fredbear's family diner? Is Golden Freddy a retired, decommissioned Fredbear left to decay in sealed safe rooms? Or is Golden Freddy something else? A manifestation or projection that only resembles Fredbear without having any physical connection to the diner's original mascot? Posters show both characters present simultaneously, suggesting separate identities, but design similarities and functional overlaps suggest they might be the same. The Ultimate Guide states they're connected, possibly the same entity, but doesn't commit to a definitive relationship. And Scott has never clarified this, despite it being one of the foundational questions about Golden Freddy's origins. Why does Golden Freddy have the powers he demonstrates? The ability to appear impossibly, to crash games, to teleport, to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, to create elaborate nightmares that trap souls. These abilities far exceed what other possessed animatronics can do. Gabriel in Freddy can move around the restaurant and attack guards, but he can't affect the game program itself. Susie in Chica follows patrol patterns. Fritz in Foxy has to physically run down the hallway. But Golden Freddy breaks these rules consistently, operating on a level that seems to require explanation beyond simple spirit possession. Is it because two spirits generate more power? Is it because the crying child's death was particularly traumatic, creating a stronger haunting? Is it because Cassidy's rage is so intense that it warps reality around her? Or is it something about the Golden Bear suit itself? Some property of the spring lock mechanisms, or the way the suit was retired and sealed away, that makes it particularly receptive to supernatural influence? We don't know, and the games haven't given us enough information to determine which explanation, if any, is correct. The question of whether Golden Freddy ever moves on also remains unresolved. The Happiest Day minigame shows a child in a Golden Freddy mask, receiving a cake and disappearing, their mask falling away in what appears to be release from the mortal world. But Ultimate Custom Night, which takes place after Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, where the Happiest Day presumably occurs, shows Golden Freddy as the architect of William Afton's nightmare, still very much present and active and refusing to rest. How do we reconcile these events? Did Happiest Day free one spirit from Golden Freddy while another remained? Did the events play out in a different order than we thought? Did Golden Freddy find peace briefly only to be drawn back by the need to ensure William Afton's punishment? Or are we misunderstanding what happiest day represents, perhaps seeing it as literal release when it's actually something more metaphorical or incomplete? The Old Man Consequences encounter, where the red bear sprite is encouraged to drown in the lake and rest, suggests that as of Ultimate Custom Night, Golden Freddy still hasn't moved on, still hasn't found the peace that other spirits achieved. But we don't know if drowning in the lake represents successful release or just another form of eternal torment. There's also the question of Golden Freddy's role in the murders themselves. We know the 5 children from the missing children incident were killed by William Afton in the safe room of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We know their bodies were stuffed into animatronic suits, but the exact mechanism of how they came to possess those suits is ambiguous, especially for the 5th child associated with Golden Freddy. The Give Gifts, Give Life minigame shows the puppet placing masks on the first 4 victims to awaken them, but the sequence cuts to static and Golden Freddy's jump scare before we see the 5th child's awakening. Does this mean the puppet successfully awakened the 5th child in Golden Freddy just like the others? Or does it mean something went wrong, some interruption or failure that led to a different kind of possession? If Golden Duo is correct, and the crying child was already in the suit, how did the puppet's attempt to give life to Cassidy interact with an already present spirit? Did they merge? Did one become dominant while the other became passive? Or did they remain separate consciousnesses that just happened to share the same space, unable to communicate or even fully aware of each other's presence? The mechanics of dual possession, if that's what occurred, have never been explained in ways that answer these fundamental how and why questions. And then there's the matter of Golden Freddy's physical state. He appears without an endoskeleton in most of his manifestations, slumped and lifeless, as if the suit is empty or only partially present. But in some appearances, particularly in the second game's hallway encounter, we can see wires and skeletal components, suggesting there is an endoskeleton even if it's damaged or incomplete. Is Golden Freddy truly missing his endoskeleton, perhaps because William Afton removed it when he dismantled the animatronics in Follow Me? Or is the endoskeleton present but hidden, obscured by the supernatural nature of his manifestations? The slumped posture makes sense for a suit without internal structure, but it also makes sense for a spirit projecting an image of death and tragedy, choosing to appear broken and discarded, because that's how the spirits feel. That's what they've become. Why does Golden Freddy specifically target Mike Schmidt in the first game, manifesting in ways that seem personal, with the "it's me" hallucinations appearing throughout the restaurant? If Golden Freddy is possessed by the crying child, and Mike Schmidt is Michael Afton, the crying child's older brother, then the "it's me" messages take on profound meaning. A younger brother trying to reach out to the older brother who accidentally killed him, trying to be recognized despite the mechanical body he now inhabits. But if Golden Freddy is only Cassidy, or primarily Cassidy, why would she have this specific fixation on Michael? She has no established connection to him, no reason to seek recognition from him specifically, rather than from any other night guard or adult who enters the restaurant. This apparent targeting makes sense under certain theories, but not others, and we've never received clarification about whether the targeting is intentional and meaningful, or just a coincidence of gameplay mechanics that we're reading too deeply into. The broader question of what Golden Freddy wants also remains frustratingly unclear. In Ultimate Custom Night, the goal seems obvious. Torture William Afton forever, refuse to let him escape through death or any other means, maintain an eternal nightmare as punishment for his crimes. But what about before Ultimate Custom Night? What was Golden Freddy's goal when attacking Mike Schmidt? When appearing in the hallways of the second game's location? When manifesting during the happiest day sequence? Was it always about revenge? About finding William Afton and making him pay? Was it about being remembered? About ensuring that the murdered children's identities weren't forgotten? Was it about protecting other children from meeting the same fate? Or was it something simpler and more tragic, just confusion and fear and the desperate need to go home, to return to a family and a life that death made impossible to reclaim? Different appearances suggest different motivations, or they suggest no clear motivation at all beyond the agitation and aggression that possession seems to create in all the spirits trapped in animatronic forms. These unanswered questions aren't failures of storytelling. They're features, not bugs. Scott Cawthon has crafted Golden Freddy as an enduring mystery precisely by refusing to answer these fundamental questions, by providing enough evidence to generate theories, but never enough to definitively prove any single theory correct. This approach frustrates those who want closure, who want the satisfaction of solving the puzzle and knowing they got it right. But it delights those who enjoy the process of theorizing more than the destination of knowing, who find value in the discussions and debates that these questions generate, who appreciate that after more than 10 years, we're still discovering new angles, still proposing new interpretations, still finding details we missed on previous examinations. Golden Freddy works as a character because he remains unknowable, because every answer leads to new questions, because clarity is always just out of reach no matter how carefully we examine the evidence. He's the mystery that can't be solved, the puzzle with missing pieces, the story with no final chapter. And maybe, in a franchise built on horror and uncertainty, that's exactly what makes him perfect. As we emerge from the depths of this mystery, as we return to the surface from the darkened halls where Golden Freddy waits with hollow eyes and slumped shoulders, we're left with more questions than answers, and perhaps that's how it should be. Golden Freddy has been with us since the beginning of Five Nights at Freddy's, since that first game in 2014, when players stumbled upon a slumped yellow bear in their office and watched their screen crash to desktop in a moment of pure, unexpected terror. He's evolved from Easter egg to central figure, from mysterious anomaly to potential architect of the franchise's ultimate judgment. But through all these transformations, through years of theorizing and debating and discovering hidden clues, Golden Freddy has retained his essential nature. Unknowable, powerful, tragic. We know, or think we know, certain things. We know that Cassidy's name is hidden in the survival logbook, connected to Golden Freddy through layers of puzzles and the phrase, "It's me." We know that the crying child died in Fredbear's jaws and may have become connected to a golden bear suit. We know that Golden Freddy appears in ways that defy the rules governing other animatronics, crashing games and appearing impossibly and creating elaborate nightmares. We know that the one you should not have killed tortures William Afton in Ultimate Custom Night, and that all evidence points toward Golden Freddy as that vengeful spirit. We know that the Fazbear Frights books introduce Andrew as a parallel character who might inform our understanding of the game's vengeful spirit. But we don't know, can't know with certainty, who exactly inhabits Golden Freddy's form, whether it's one spirit or two or more, whether the vengeful aspect and the tragic aspect belong to the same consciousness, or represent different individuals sharing impossible space. We don't know if Golden Freddy and Fredbear are the same entity or separate but related. We don't know why Golden Freddy has powers that exceed other possessed animatronics. We don't know if Happiest Day truly freed the spirits, or if Golden Freddy remains trapped, unable or unwilling to move on. These gaps, these uncertainties, they're not accidents. They're the architecture of an enduring mystery. Golden Freddy represents what makes Five Nights at Freddy's lore so compelling to so many people. It's not just horror, though the horror is effective. It's not just puzzle solving, though the puzzles reward careful attention. It's the way the franchise creates spaces for interpretation, for debate, for theories that can never be fully proven or fully dismissed. It's the way Scott Cawthon has built a narrative that invites participation, that demands we engage actively rather than passively consuming a story that's been completely spelled out for us. Golden Freddy is the ultimate expression of this approach. A character who has been central to the franchise for its entire existence while remaining undefined in crucial ways, who generates discussion and analysis and artistic interpretation because there's room for all of that, because the ambiguity is generous rather than confusing. When we talk about Golden Freddy, we're talking about Cassidy and the crying child, and Andrew and Fredbear, and vengeance and tragedy, and the inability to move on. We're talking about the way trauma echoes through decades, the way pain can bind souls to objects and places, the way the need for justice, even twisted supernatural justice, can become more powerful than the need for peace. We're talking about children who died in horrible ways and whose stories don't end cleanly, don't resolve with a simple good ending and credits roll. We're talking about the horror of consciousness persisting beyond death in forms that can't communicate, can't be understood, can only rage and frighten and seek something that remains forever out of reach. This is what Golden Freddy means. Not a single answer, but a collection of possibilities. Not a solved mystery, but an ongoing exploration. Not a character we understand, but a character we continue to investigate. Year after year, game after game, theory after theory. And as long as that golden bear slumps in corners with his jaw hanging open, as long as those hollow eyes stare from posters that change when we're not watching, as long as It's Me flashes on screens in the middle of the night, the mystery continues, the discussions continue, the theories evolve, and somewhere in the darkness, Golden Freddy waits, patient and eternal, holding secrets that Scott Cawthon might never fully reveal, wearing faces we might never definitively name, embodying a mystery that's become as iconic as any solved element of the franchise. That's Golden Freddy, one spirit, many faces, and an answer that remains beautifully, frustratingly, perfectly out of reach. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of Five Nights at Freddy's most enduring mysteries, I'd appreciate it if you take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps the channel reach more people who share our fascination with these dark, detailed stories that refuse to be simple or easy. And let me know in the comments what your Golden Freddy theory is, whether you lean toward Golden Duo or prefer a single spirit explanation, whether you think we'll ever get a definitive answer, or whether the ambiguity is part of the character's eternal appeal. Until next time, rest easy, and remember that some mysteries are meant to haunt us, meant to linger in quiet hours when sleep comes slowly and questions outnumber answers. Sweet dreams.